guys, today I'm here with the founder of Graphlit, with Kirk Marple, and I thought I know about Graphlit. I think it's a great technology, but sometimes I have issues how to use it efficiently myself. It would be great to have Kirk on my side to answer certain questions, and we will do exactly this today, and I'm really excited. Could you maybe tell us a little bit what is Graphlit for anybody who doesn't
Mhm.
know it and what Graphlit isn't?
Yeah, for sure. No, glad to be here. I mean, Graphlit really is an application platform for developers. And so we consider it a RAG as a service platform where it handles all of your data ingestion, web scraping, kind of getting data into large language models, and then provides things like semantic search, RAG conversations, and a lot more.
Awesome. And if you say it's a platform for developers, it's RAG as a service. Maybe if I come from other platforms, are there some things that Graphlit doesn't do that?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is we're opinionated that it is a platform. So we're not and a cloud native platform. So we don't run on premise. You can't kind of package it up. We're not open source. So we're really focused on providing the best service to developers as an API.
All right, perfect, awesome, cool, cool. I came also to Graphlit because I just felt like, hey, it seems very easy to use. You just pass in a URL of your document, and then immediately
Mhm.
everything gets ingested, and I can use it in any application which uses large language models or semantic search or whatever. Um, Sometimes where I struggled a bit was, okay, where in docs do I have to go to find the right
Mhm.
information? And sometimes also, how do I use all the GraphQL language, which I honestly was
Yeah.
just too lazy to read up because I wanted to get
Mhm.
my application working.
Mhm.
And great.
Eh,
So yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I mean, so we do offer the GraphQL API, but now we have native SDKs for
Right.
Python, Node.js, and .NET. And so, I mean, most developers actually end up using the SDKs, which makes it a lot easier. So you don't have to learn the GraphQL side of it.
I agree. I agree. Okay, let's do this.
Yep.
The use case that we thought about is how to insert an MP3 file of people talking and
Hmm.
use not only RAG but GraphRAG.
Yeah.
And we will do this from beginning to end. I will
Hmm.
just share my screen to set up the project from beginning to end. Awesome. So right now, here in my folder, the first thing we have to
Hmm.
do is, if we have a Python project, we have to set up the Python environment, obviously. Then we have to install Graphlit. How is it called? Graphlit client, right?
Yeah, Graphlit dash client. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's also install python.env for later on. Now that we have everything, let's open up the cursor environment. Of course, we're using
Hmm.
cursor today. We will set here the .env file, and we have to set the environment variable for Graphlit, right? This is, was
Correct.
it API key? I forgot.
Yeah, so there's three of them. So there's Graphlit, its organization ID, Graphlit environment ID, and Graphlit JWT secret. And
Perfect.
so,
So to get them, I have to
yep,
go on the website.
correct. So it's yeah, you could do it's portal.graphlit.dev. Yep,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and then create an account or sign in.
All right, all right.
And then the way we do this is each project essentially is like a backend for an application. And
Okay,
so all the data is partitioned within that project, and each project gets its own API keys. And essentially, we pass a JWT token to the API, and that's what the client creates, and that's what those values are used for.
great. So I just created a new project, and
Yep,
these are the environment variables that I need, right?
correct.
So the organization ID, but then I have to know how, right? Let's go back. I already peeked into the call it book that you sent me, and I will just copy over
Yeah,
the environment variables from here.
yeah. That's the best way to look at that, and then that basically in the Colab notebook, we store them as secrets, but you can obviously do the same thing through here.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So we have those three. Now I copy them over. This is the organization ID. Very good. The preview environment. Because I'm on preview, right? Because I'm on the free trial. Very good.
Well, the preview and the production, so basically like preview would be used for like your development environment. And
Right,
then production, we have a production key, which is for your actual application. So we essentially segment preview and production data. So you can mess around with it, test it in development, and then not mess up your production environment.
right. That makes sense. Yes, yes. And that's exactly what we are doing right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I got set up my local Python notebook, Jupyter
Cool.
notebook. From, yeah, let's do this. This we don't need. Awesome. Obviously, you shouldn't share with anybody the private keys, but well, that's what we do right now. This is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we got this set up, typically when I build something with Graphlit, what are the steps that I have to walk through?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the first is just creating your Graphlit client. And so that, like in the notebook I provided, it's once you have your environment variable set up, it's simply just, Graphlit, creating the Graphlit object through a constructor.
Okay, and I do that if I look over here, just
Yep.
like this. So I have I copy, I can't get this all out. I just need these two lines, and then I have the Graphlit object. That's what you just talked about, right?
Exactly. So that you can pass the key and the IDs as variables, but if they're not passed, it'll grab it from the environment.
Right, right. Because we loaded them in here, they are already passed.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Okay. So now that I have the client, I can work with the client. I can now with the goal of uploading
Yep.
the MP3. What should I think about?
Yeah, so the way we work is everything is a piece of content. And so content is the object that you'll deal with. That could be a web page, it could be an MP3, it could be anything. So we call it ingestion, and ingest URI is where you would start. And so in the Colab, there's a couple of helper functions just that do error handling. You might want to grab that and kind of show, okay, here's how to set up the ingestion.
So this Colab
so we've gotten through.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then
come here to the helper functions.
Yeah, so scroll down a little bit to ingest URI.
Uh-huh.
There it is. Let's see.
Here.
Right there.
Okay. This one I need.
Yeah.
Okay. And with ingest URI, I basically what is happening here? So I pass in a workflow ID, I pass in a correlation ID.
Yeah, so what that is
I do a lot of stuff here already, right?
Yeah, so this actually does a lot of the process for you. So it's the workflow is how we process the data. So that's it's optional. We'll transcribe your file. If you want to get started and we can kind of build up from there, you can remove the workflow parameter and you can remove the correlation ID if you want to. That's used for billing, tracking like costs. But then you can remove the workflow parameter from ingest URI in the client below.
Okay, but I still need the input types. How do we do it that this works? Maybe I put it here.
Yeah, if you go back to the Colab, the imports were there. It was under the from. Yeah, it's the from Graphlit API import input types.
Here,
yeah, that just gets you those.
Okay.
We just made it so it's a little easier to get those.
I like it. I like it. So we can remove this ID. Do we also need the entity reference input?
No. So you just remove that whole parameter there.
Okay. This we also remove.
Yeah. And so that's the simplest case.
That looks good. That's something that I can understand immediately. That's very good. Okay.
Yep. And so what it's doing, we just had these helpers that catch the error and print it to the console just to make it easier. But really, it's that graphlit.client.ingest URI that's doing the work. And so
And I
what
can
that's going
ingest
to do,
any
yep,
kind of content with the ingest URI command, right?
yeah, it could be, I mean, a PDF, it could even be a web page, it could be an MP3, a video, an image, anything.
Okay, let's try that out once.
And I mean, just it has to be
It has to be
a
hosted.
hosted
Okay.
file.
Okay. So let's first maybe use the one that I think you have here one, right? Somewhere.
Yeah, it's down there, but yeah, it's probably keep going. Yeah, those are just some graph rendering helpers
Yeah,
we can talk about later.
this
There you
one.
go.
Very good. Very good. Uh, do I okay, I get some result, I guess.
Yeah, so that'll give you back the ID to that piece of content.
Okay.
And so what this is doing, it's transcribing it's ingesting. So it's basically uploading it to blob storage and
Yeah.
then extracting metadata from the file, transcribing the file, and now you have your basically an ID to a piece of content in the cloud.
And now if I go back to the Graphlit portal, can I see this piece of content in storage probably, no?
Yeah, yeah. So if you go to the contents view there you go.
Okay. Okay, very good.
And And so that is, I mean, the metadata you see on the bottom right, so the duration, the bit rate, that was parsed from the file.
Okay.
Um, your content ID is the same one you see up top. And then even
Okay,
things
yeah.
like, I mean, the original date, creation date is when we uploaded it, and that's what you have there.
Okay, great. Let me also quickly ingest my own audio, which I
Yeah.
prepared for the call, which we have here. And then we can just see both of them in the console. Great. Okay, so now this is the, as you said, it gets transcribed,
hmm
and afterwards it gets, I guess, chunked and embedded.
Exactly. So all of that, like by the time you get the ID back, it's been transcribed, it's been chunked, it's embedded, it's in the search index at that point. So by using the flag is synchronous up top, it's
Yeah.
waiting for that to finish. And so in the
Okay.
notebook, it's better to have that just so you can like go on to the next step. But it's actually asynchronous by default. So you
Okay.
can kind of fire and forget, and it'll just kind of
That
work
makes
in the
sense.
background. And what we do is we give you an ID that you can check on it later if you need to.
Right. Yeah, you have to do the push versus pull. If we check here, now there should be, there's the second one. Awesome. So we have now both of them. If it lets me click it. Yeah, great. So we have both of them here. Now my first question is, when now I upsorted those audios with the default
Mhm.
settings. So
Yeah.
now if I want to change, for example, the embedding model or the I don't know, the chunking strategy or the size, how would
Yeah.
I now know without you? Where do I find out about this?
Yeah, so we just recently for the embedding model, we actually just recently added that to the API, and so it's done in the project, so that the project is where it controls you because the embedding model has to be the same for all of your content.
Okay.
You don't want to mix embedding models. So we actually have a different Colab notebook I can show you on
Okay.
how to
If you
set
say
that
in
up.
the project, do you mean like in the interface or?
No, it's only available through the API right now.
Okay,
Um,
okay. But if we, let's
and
say we don't need to change it on the project level. Are there other things that I can change just for the ingestion itself, for this very
yeah,
ingestion? What are
so
some of the things?
some things so we can talk about we go through different stages of workflow. So there's
Yes.
ingestion, indexing, enrichment, extraction, and you can configure each of those stages separately. And so one of the things, preparation is the stage where you can configure um, your language for transcription. So that could be one of the places. So basically the thing you can do is if you go to the notebook and look for the create workflow method over there.
That one.
Yeah, yeah. So right in there, that's where we're for extracting the entities into the graph. And the nice thing about this is you can add in configuration of all the stages at once. So we can go in there and add a preparation stage
Okay,
to
okay.
this. And so we can start building that layer.
Oh, that was the wrong one. Um, let's try that out because that's something that I was
Yeah.
always a bit didn't work. Yeah, I just it like you look at this kind of code and you feel like, pooh, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have an extraction workflow job, workflow stage input, service types, then the model text. Um, let's
Yeah.
say now. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, no,
Yeah,
go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I mean, so in the documentation, one of the good places to look is I'll send you the link here. It's under workflows in the API reference. And so that, I just sent you the link too, but
Uh-huh,
it's
uh-huh.
under API reference. And this kind of walks you through all the different stages of, um, of the processing. And so you can configure, I mean, really down to every detail of how a piece of content is processed.
So if we go here, for example, to ingestion,
Yeah, so ingestion, you can configure like a filter to say, okay, only ingest things of this type.
okay, I saw this already before, and I thought, okay, I have here some kind of mutations. How do
Yeah,
let's just take I don't know, I wanna use the first mutation here,
yeah,
and how do I now translate this mutation into my Python code?
yeah. So that's one of the things we're working on in the documentation is showing an example of the SDKs and the APIs. So we don't have that yet, but there's a one-to-one mapping here where essentially create workflow is graphlit.client.create workflow. And there's the input object, which is workflow input. So you see that at the bottom there. And then the ID, name, state, ingestion, those are the output of the GraphQL. So
Okay,
in the SDK, you're essentially getting an object back.
right.
And so that create workflow.id that you see under return response create workflow essentially is an object, a pydantic object that you get back with the output. So there's a one-to-one mapping between um, the syntax of GraphQL and the SDK.
Okay, great. Let's say I wanna just duplicate this workflow alone here. What
Well,
would be my how would
we'll
I
see
go
that.
about it?
So that's not a call by itself. So
Okay.
that's just the schema for it. Um, if you go back to the ingestion in the docs, the
Uh-huh.
variables.
Yes.
So if you scroll down, the variables are what you'd really want to map over.
This I want. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would go. So okay. So I would use the Graphlit Python SDK.
So it'd be
To
graphlit dot. If you scroll up to the input, so you could extend this, and so under the name, so it says name equals entity extraction,
yeah.
and then you could type ingestion, like yeah, exactly like that.
Uh-huh. And input type, I just know that I have
Um,
to take the right one, or
it should have a mouse over. It actually auto formatted a second ago. If you if you
it
mouse
did.
over ingestion, it's yeah, there it is.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay.
And so that should look pretty much like the GraphQL that is below.
Does it? Does it? Let's
And
check it. Let's check it.
so you have ingestion, and then you can basically there's the same syntax like if types, file types. It basically maps over right away.
So I have ingestion workflow. Okay, ingestion workflow. If,
Mhm.
okay, here's the if I,
Yeah,
uh,
sometimes it guesses, but on the if you mouse over the ingestion workflow stage input, it should give you yeah ingestion content filter input.
okay, so if input types in which one did it tell me? This one?
Ingestion filter content input. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Um, this is the
That
autocompleted,
looks
right?
That looks about right. Yep.
Okay, but then probably like something like this, or do I have, because in Python, I
Should
mean,
just be if equal.
it should be if equal, really.
Um,
Very
I think,
un-Python-like, no?
or it's a parameter. So it's
Probably,
let's
right?
see,
No?
like add that underscore to
So we have to
if
add
it's
underscore if. Okay, great. So now we have the workflow ingestion workflow stage input. Then we have
yeah
as then we check if the input types is then we need ingestion content filter input type, and I know this because no, here I have to check. Because it's the if, right? It's because it's
mhm,
here, and then I know it's types
yeah
file types audio. Okay, because this is like a subtype somehow, no?
exactly. So what you're doing is you're basically setting up an if statement of if the content has file as its content type
Right.
and has audio as its sorry, file as its content type, audio as its file type, um, it'll then accept it. So you're setting up a filter of what it'll
O-
accept.
Okay, great. So we just set up our first filter, and I can set up multiple filters for ingestion, yes or no? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so the if has an and and or option as well, so you can get complicated with how to build the filters. And the
Awesome.
types and file types are arrays. So you could say only files and pages per se, or something like that.
But I get it more and more now. So we have here, we create a workflow, and here in this workflow, we can, in the workflow input, can define all the different stages, which are
Yep.
ingestion, indexing, preparation, extraction, enrichment. We just did ingestion. Let's
Mhm.
do one indexing just for, well, for training it, right? So we go
Yeah.
here, back to the
Yeah.
docs.
There's not indexing doesn't have a ton of options.
Okay,
You
then
can
use
see there
another
like
one. This
one.
is more fun. Let's use another one. You
Yeah.
very
It
good point.
preparation's a good one.
Okay, let's do
Indexing,
preparation.
you can say if you wanted to infer the language. That's pretty. I think that's the only option we have to enable that, which is done with an API call. So we say to opt into anything that'll cost extra. But preparation has a whole bunch of options. Yeah.
Great. Let's go over to preparation. We can see we can prepare it by summarizing content. We have assign a specification. Like I guess it
So you
means
can
that
tell
it's
it
like
which LLM to use for summarization.
this is just for the summarization. Okay. Um, document
Yep.
preparation. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that's like
Um,
if you all the options like setting your language, detecting language, even bringing your own API key for deepgram, those kind of things are all within this preparation section.
let's let's try out the summarized content. We
Yeah,
have here again the workflow, and we can see we can summarize it in summary, in bullet points, in headlines, in post, in question, and chapters. Let's use bullets. I think that makes a lot of sense, which we already have here. So what I do now is I copy it over again into uh, my file, and now I know already. Okay, I need the preparation workflow stage input. Yeah, that makes sense.
hmm
Then we have here okay. Summarization seems fine, right?
yep,
So we use here the summarization. Int already
yeah.
gives
So
me
it's pretty
everything.
close actually, but it'll be summarization strategy input is the type.
Here, right?
Yeah,
Okay, it's the summarization strategy that we need here. Yeah, very good. Items, let's change it up to 4.
and
Um,
then it is. I'm not sure if this would work, but there are enums. So it's putting it in as a string instead of bullets. Like there is an enum for that.
for
Um,
this one, we need the enum somewhere here, no? This one,
yeah,
uh-huh. Yeah. No, is it this one? No, I think it's a different
Um,
one, no? like
What
this.
does it say? Yeah, if you mouse over strategy input, it should tell you.
Yeah, it should tell me.
Summarization types. Yeah. There you go.
Great, and then I
Yeah.
can check what options I have. Oh, great, great, great. I like it.
Yeah, it just makes it easier with the enums. And then, and so what this does, they're basically some built-in prompts for summarization. And then
Yes.
you can actually put in custom in here and then put your own summarization prompt, which is pretty cool. So like if you
How
want
would
to
I do
build
that?
your own categorization or however you want to ask, like basically have it ask a question about it, that works nicely.
Let's just check out. For doing this, I would need to go to specification, yes?
It'll just use GPT-4o by default. So you don't need, that's optional.
But like for example, when you said if I want to pass in my own prompt for summarization, how would
You can
I?
do that. You can do that in the code. I'll show you how to do that in the code.
Okay.
Um,
Where's the code here?
yeah, so just change your enum to custom. And then there's another parameter, I think it's called custom prompt, if I remember right.
For the
So just
summarization strategy input.
it'll be in this input. Yeah, just hit if you I think it's called custom prompt. Just prompt. Okay, I was wrong.
Okay.
So yeah, just prompt.
And here
then,
now I can just write stuff.
Uh-huh.
Okay. In a few, summarize the content of the audio by picking the most funny parts. Very good. Oh, great. Awesome.
Perfect.
And now, but what is also interesting for me now is what you mentioned is with this specification. So you said here now I could change, for example, what you said, which LLM can be used?
You can, yeah, you can, if you, so specifications are kind of wrappers for the LLMs. And you can basically pick your model like Anthropic, Sonnet, OpenAI,
Okay,
O1.
let's try that out. Let's try that out.
So that'll be a different,
no.
Yeah, we'll need to create a specification. So we have to do that anyway to have a conversation, a RAG conversation.
Okay, let's do that anyway. We probably need it. We need it in the preparation phase, yes?
Yeah, so that, what you'll want to do first, let's go back to the collab and copy the create specification. I think it's called create OpenAI something.
Okay.
That one.
This one. Can you just explain for me again, what is a specification in that context?
Yeah. So think of it like a preset. So it's a wrapper object for LLM access. So it gives you all of your configuration for RAG, for like how to do the RAG, how to do summarizations, what model to use. So it's basically you can pre-configure these and then share them and reuse them later.
What is the difference between the specification for an LLM, where you just mentioned it, you specify how the summarization, for example, would be done, and what is the difference between? Would this here also be a specification?
No, so a specification's only a wrapper for, it's like a model preset. So the specification's just, it's purely configuration. It's what model service, what model, what API key, and a system prompt. So you pre-configure your specifications, and then you can just you can assign them to other places.
For me to understand, in general, when I work with Graphlit, I have a workflow for ingestion, but it's also used for retrieval afterwards, as far as I understand.
The workflow is, so there's two main points of configuration. So the workflow is how we get data into the system.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's kind of it's only assigned during input, and then the specification can be used in a lot of different places. And so it's just a way so that you can, like, say you want to change your model to GPT-5, you only have to change it one place. You only have to change it in your specification, and then you can just assign that specification ID anywhere. And so that's kind of the reasoning. So it's a refactoring kind of concept where you can just have that
for the retrieval step.
It can be, yeah, for retrieval. It's for anything that touches an LLM. So summarization,
which is also
LLM
happening in the workflow.
completions. Yeah.
But
And
okay,
by
but then
default, oh, sorry.
by default, yeah.
By default, we use OpenAI GPT-4o if you don't assign a specification at all. So it
That
is
makes
optional, but it gives you all the power of all the configuration.
for me to understand. There is the workflow, how we get
Mhm.
data into the system.
Yeah,
Then there are afterwards ways how to get data out of the system.
yeah.
And in this section of how to get data into the system, we have exactly these steps, which you mentioned already, which is ingestion, indexing, preparation, extraction, and enrichment.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, great. That is
Exactly.
already helping a lot. And
Yeah,
now
yeah.
the difference between, for example, a normal RAG setup, retrieval augmented
Mhm,
generation, where I take content, I take chunks, I embed it, vectorize it, and make it later
mhm.
semantic searchable. And between a GraphRAG is that if you use a GraphRAG, you extract much more information from the content
Mhm.
once at the time you get it into the system, and you
Correct.
also structure it differently. Like, yeah,
Exactly. So the big thing to do GraphRAG per se, the first step is just to create the knowledge graph. And so that is where you have to have a workflow with extraction set up. And so that's going to basically create the nodes in the graph. So by default, when you ingest something, you get one node in the graph for your piece of content. And so we still have a graph, but you just have the pointer to your content. But what we do when you enable extraction is we pull out the people, the places, the topics, everything, and you just get this kind of extra nodes connected to your content. And so that's essentially what you're seeing here with it. You have to enable that in the workflow because it's token intensive,
right, right, yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously costs more. So
Let,
so we let
let,
you kind of opt into these different things.
let's try out the following. You already explained me how I can like use the the documentation, the
Yeah,
mutations to build something. Let's try to use what we have so far here to just
yeah.
see what happens when we run it. Because right now we have maybe we I still because before we used just the ingest URI, the default
Mhm.
setup, and now
So
we set up something custom. So we also need this part, right? Yes.
yep. And so what we can do here is, um, I mean, if we want to keep it simple, I mean, you need, you can comment out the specification ID out of here, and we'll just use, well, I guess comment that whole line out. And we'll default to, I think, Sonnet 3.5 or maybe GPT-4 here, I can't remember, um, for extraction, but it still will work.
Okay.
And then uh, the so by default, so you have to create the workflow, and then
Okay.
you'll have to add the workflow ID parameter to ingest URI.
Okay, let's try that out. Um, we have the function here. I will just remove this. Yeah, we can leave it actually. I mean,
Yeah, we'll come back and use that.
um, now I need Graphlit, ingest. No, that was not it. What was it? It was just ingest URI. Very good. um,
Or we can just add that parameter to that method, the helper function, if we want, because we
um,
had we had removed that before.
this helper method.
If you scroll up to ingest URI,
Uh-huh.
keep going. There.
We
Yep.
wrote the function. I already forgot.
And we had removed that at the start, but now we can kind of add that back. So now you can pass workflow ID.
Yes, you're right. You're right. That's what we did before. Very good. I remember. Perfect. And
And
now we pass
then,
in the work. So we first create the workflow and then we pass it into ingest URI.
yep, exactly. And so so when you create, whenever you ingest something, or you create a feed to ingest things, all you need to do is pass the workflow ID, and then it'll use that with during ingestion.
So we need workflow ID. Await create workflow. That's it, right?
Yep. And then all you'll need to do, you still need to assign the parameter up top. So if you go back up to ingest URI, there. So see where it says
Right.
Graphlit client, ingest URI, then add workflow equals, yep, entity reference input, and then workflow ID. Yep, that should work.
Great.
Okay, so now that's passing the workflow in.
Uh-huh.
Let's see, you need to create the workflow. You can remove the specification ID parameter from workflow. I think if you just scroll up
Yeah,
one
we have it. Yeah, we
cell,
have.
yeah, you can remove that. Okay, so what you'll get is basically a workflow with with ingestion, preparation, extraction, and then you can call ingest URI with that ID.
So when I run the workflow, when I run create workflow, it does do
Yep.
something on the back end of
So
Graphlit.
all it's doing is essentially creating an object in the database.
Okay.
So creating the workflow is purely configuration, and then and you'll just get an ID to it. It's a storing JSON of the database, and then it's when you call the ingest that it uses that data.
Great. So now if we ingest, we already ingested this before.
Uh-huh.
If we ingest it again, maybe let's use the yours because I think ours is very short. And um, if we ingest it again, what happens if we ingest the two files at the
Yeah.
same time? Yeah, in the same
So
project.
this will it will check if the original URI is the same or not, and so it does do some deduplication in there. And so this will basically apply the workflow and basically re-ingest it in place. So it'll keep the same ID, but it'll just rerun the workflow again.
Okay, great. Now that opens up the next question. Now that I ingested it and I told it to also summarize
Yeah.
something, I said,
How do we get access to that? So there's a get content makes sense. So now once you have the ID to the content, you can call graphlit.client.getContent.
we already created the client, no?
It should be graphlit.client.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh,
And then just
this
get
one.
underscore content. And then I guess result is it should be the ID.
ID should be probably right. We didn't print the result. What is the result? The result, yeah. Should have better call it ID. No? Sometimes the autocomplete is working very well, sometimes not.
I know sometimes it guesses and it's close but not right. But yep. Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we get. We get ring order case of unstructured data. What else do
So
we
you
have?
can I think it's content dot custom summary, if I remember right.
Okay. Where do we have it?
Maybe not. Maybe it's or just custom. I'm forgetting what we called it.
Oops. Custom. No, was it here? Let me see it. I mean, there's a lot inside. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, one thing you can do is do content dot markdown, and you can see everything. Oh, there it is. Summary equals
So
custom
custom.
summary.
We have but we didn't. Did we write custom summary? Did we do it?
That should have been. Now this is something we'll probably have to edit out, but it might be a bug.
Okay.
If we restart the same content, it might not be applying the
Okay. Okay.
workflow correctly. So if you use a
But,
different URL,
but I see how we can get the content. That's good. That's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's content.custom underscore summary is what you want. I think it's just because we reused the same content. It
That
didn't
might be.
summarize it the second time.
But that's fine. That's fine. Um, let's take this again, the workflow that we had before, that we already
Yeah.
started. And what I want to know now, just before a few minutes, is what would I need to do now to enable GraphRAG?
Okay, so the extraction is already enabled. And so if you, with this workflow, with extraction, that'll generate the nodes in the graph. And so that is the ingestion half of GraphRAG, is creating the knowledge graph. Then to use it on the, if you go back to the create
But wait a second,
OpenAI
this already creates a graph.
when you apply this workflow during ingestion, it's creating the graph for you right there.
Right now, did I apply the workflow during ingestion? I
Yeah,
did, right?
yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
okay. So I already have a graph with a single node in theory.
Yep. And so it should have extracted the people, the places, that kind of stuff from your from the podcast.
And why did it do that? Because of this stuff here?
Uh-huh.
But
Yep. So what it's saying is essentially
ah,
you're enabling entity extraction at
okay,
ingest time.
okay, okay, very good. So okay, I didn't read that.
No. So that's kind of, these are all like opt-in to the behavior.
Right.
So you're saying like, when you ingest content, do this. That's kind of what the workflow tells it to do.
Okay, then let's do one thing. Let's delete
Yeah.
what we have in here, and we just upload it again, and then everything should work
Yeah.
probably fine. I mean, we don't override anything. We don't because this is now becoming very interesting. So we have again here this one. We have the workflow ID. Then we ingest the first one, and then afterwards we ingest also my conversation. Yeah. Which we had over here. Okay, great. Okay, so now this is both running. It's doing its job. So now, as you said, we already have a graph with two nodes after this, because we ingested two types of content, two pieces of
And
content.
you'll get a lot more than two nodes. So you'll get the content nodes and then all of the subgraph that is related to it.
So
and
now
so
my question is,
it'll
can I see the graph already?
And so that's where, so in the collab that I had sent, it gets a little complicated because you need to render the graph to see it, but I can show you where the code is. So in here, if you scroll down a little bit, there. So this whole chunk of code basically it just renders the graph nicely. And so essentially it's helpers for PyViz that you can query the graph and you can render the graph. And so that's this is just sort of boilerplate PyViz stuff that we have. And
when we
it
scroll
parses
down
out the metadata.
Somewhere there is a graph shown, right? This one.
Yeah,
Yes.
there. So that essentially just helps you render that graph. And so that would be something where the node in the center, that's the content node. And all of the nodes around it are what got extracted during entity extraction.
Great, but I don't see any of those emojis that I saw above. I mean, I did see some, but not all of them, because not all of them were present, right? So I didn't see.
Right. So there's, I mean, half of them are medical related,
right.
Which I mean, we wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But you should be able to mouse over. You can see what things are. We put metadata in there.
Yeah, you did. I like it.
So some are labels, some are products, some are software.
So actually, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things to know is, so we map the entity types to JSON LD or schema.org. So there's a fixed ontology of the types, the type system for the entity. So we use the LLM to identify the objects, the type, and then we create those objects and link them to the content.
Great, awesome. That sounds like because oftentimes when we have some applications, the quality of the retrieved data is not good enough,
Mhm.
and I often feel like, hey, probably this should work better, at least in theory. And
Yep. And the thing to look at is if we go up to the create specification call in just either way, either file, but
either file. Yeah, let's take this one then.
I
This one.
can walk you through. So here's the key parts.
Yes.
It's the specification type. You can have different ones for extraction or completion or different use cases. So like if you're going to do RAG, you would create a completion, LM completion,
Right.
and then you can also create like embedding specifications and things like that. But we'll do completion. You're picking the model service type. So that's kind of your vendor for your model. So we're using OpenAI. And then we're selecting the model. We're sending in the enum for the model. And that essentially tells it like what LLM to use. You can also create assign your own API key to it. If you don't, it'll just go on your Graphlit bill.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
then
what we normally do.
Yeah, and then each of the strategies, as we call them, are kind of where you configure the RAG pipeline. So the prompt strategy is what we do with the incoming user prompt. And that is like, do we rewrite the user prompt
Right.
to optimize it for search or different things like that? Retrieval, there's a bunch of options of like, how do you widen the context from the chunk to the section to the piece of content? You can configure things like that. So that's kind of telling it how to put the data into the context for the LLM. And
Right.
then obviously re-ranking, and then graph strategy, that's where you enable GraphRAG essentially. So GraphRAG to us is really just an option in our RAG pipeline.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just, you're just saying, hey, enable the extracted entities of the graph and add them to your context. And then the generate graph flag is just return the actual data of the graph from the conversation if you want to render it. But
Okay.
if that's not on,
Yeah.
it'll still use it. It just won't return it from the call.
Yeah, that makes sense. What okay, yeah, thank you very much. This is very useful. What I have the feeling with Graphlit, it's just it's very fast to set up, or as we saw, the different preparation extractions or specification strategies. I still feel like that you have to like there's some learning curve, no, to know, okay, now I have here which enums do I have? Okay, I have here 2 and they're 3, and I have to like figure out what has to be done. But I think that that's possible. What I also really like is that I can just add any hosted piece of content, especially when you work with SharePoint folders or with Google Drive folders. I think that's very useful because um, normal people, many companies, they work with those 2 things, and then you tell them, hey, you want to embed all your knowledge base of your company and make it searchable. Hey, you just pull it into this Google Drive or SharePoint folder, and automatically. So I think that's really useful, and I really look forward to use Graphlit much more. And the only thing that really stopped me was that I had a hard time setting up all these inputs, and I think now this helped a lot.
I think it's just, I mean, there is a bit of a learning curve, but I think the opinionated patterns are reusable. So once you understand specifications and workflows, I think it should hopefully get a lot easier. And I think just getting people to understand that first kind of wedge of that is, we need to document, or, I mean, we have some pages to help that, but I think better training materials just to kind of get over that hump we're working on that. And I think the other thing is there is a one-to-one mapping between the API and the SDKs, but we need to show examples in the docs. And we're working on that as well, of just going through the docs and having a Python example, a TypeScript example, a .NET example for everything in the API. It just takes some time to do that, but I think that'll help make it more copy and pastable, which would make developers' lives easier. So,
Yeah, I agree. This is, but no, this is great. Yeah, thank you for building it.
oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. Thank you for using it, and great to talk about it for sure.
yeah, definitely. If you wanna use Graphlit yourself, because it's obviously a great project, go over to graphlit.com or .dev. I think both work, right?
Yeah, Graph portal, graphlit.dev is the sign-in portal for the app,
Right.
and then graphlit.com is just our landing page. Yeah, but you can
Yeah.
click get there from there.
A great place also, which I really like, is not only the docs but the Discord. And other than that, I hope we can talk soon again. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Kirk.
for sure. Thanks so much.
Have a good day. See you. Bye bye.
Take care.